to one another. And so the topic, when I just came in there, because I was about number, 5 or 7, there was a topic in session there with the people around over there, not where that were throwing the money. I'm sure they also do not know one another. And to be more frank, I was about the second colored over there. I was about the only second colored, 2 colors over there. And the topic was, Mr. Trump, if we know as well that there are ambassadors and investors of America in South Africa, if such too can be taken up to you, Mr. Trump, whereby you can question further, as Mr. Cyril is there, that stating if Mr. Trump had said any South African would like refuge or to migrate to at least to America, about 70-75% blacks, we blacks, too, including the coloreds too, would have put our hands up. But our unfortunate, a mere 5%, yes, 5%, would have been able to go to America, to stay in America, to be part of America. Why? Because, as they say, the massive, massive calamity which the ANC has borne into South Africa since the 27th of April 1994. And I was amazed, because then, somehow I just had to chip in. Now, when I chipped in, it was a must for me to mention the name of Mr. Cyril. And can you believe it, sister, when I, when I just came in to put my opinion in that, I mentioned the name of Mr. Cyril. There was about 4 women, different parts over there, the way they responded, with the words I can remember a bit slightly of Mahonyo, Cyril, and and I don't know, because it seemed as though it was like putrid, his name being mentioned. Can you believe it?
So very negative sentiment around it.
I'm telling you, and besides all that too, do you know what else happened over there when they came in over there? When I was there too, it was a session whereby they said, they asked you, Mr. Trump, please, Mr. Trump, if you could put questions to Cyril and ask him, first of all, concerning BEE. What is BEE, number one? Because we know it as a black economic empowerment. Which black people besides cadres and comrades of ANC whom are still there? Because those people, they were crying. They said, no, we know nothing of BEE, of gaining of BEE. It's only ANC cadres, being black people, whom are in the high grade of South Africa today. Because why? They are being paid back for what they were then, fighting for the ANC, nothing else. And then secondly, this story that Mr. Cyril is going to the States now concerning the genocide, a refuge concerning the genocide on the African rights. About a month ago.
Okay, Papillon, I'm going to need you to wrap it up.
Okay, the crime report, which was even there was about 7,400 people killed in South Africa. So there's also genocide amongst the black people in South Africa.
Okay, Papillon, we're going to have to leave it there. But I guess maybe it shows the issues that we have as a country that we still need to work through and resolve on our own. And the idea that South Africans would want a U.S. president to hold our president accountable, and that should be something that should make communicators in the presidency have sleepless nights, right? Because the question is, well, what is it that we need to be doing to better hear and to better be accountable to the people of this country? Sam, you're in Greytown. Good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
Good. Sam, go for it.
Yes, I was listening to Chulas in the morning, but I was so concerned to hear Malusi Kigaba addressing us about people from our soldiers. So my question is, ANC, it does not take South Africans seriously. Really, they're taking criminals and bring them back to politics and be active in addressing us with with important issues of this country. While I was so asking myself, so why is this man with so many scandals still addressing us or being a minister or something in the government? I mean, it's so concerning, Kitty. It's so concerning, honestly.
Sam, were you not aware that he's been in Parliament?
No, I wasn't aware, and I was so disappointed, and that is why ANC is losing a lot of voters, because of they're not taking people seriously.
Yeah, I mean, look, Sam, I'm going to encourage you. Go and take a look at that list of MPs. You might be surprised, very surprised.
Yeah, maybe that jail is made for us poor people, you know. Politicians are not meant to go to jail.
Yeah. Sam, in Great Town, let's leave it there. You know, my technical producer, Mark, was making a point this morning around the Zondo Commission of Inquiry and just what has come of that. What has come of that? And I suppose it feeds into what Sam is saying when he raises the issue of Malusi Gigaba. But of course, Gigaba isn't the only one who was fingered in some of those processes, that still enjoys high office, still enjoys, existence within the political infrastructure of our country. And that is the reality that we have to live with. Mike, you're in Middelburg. Good morning.
Morning, Cathy. Thanks for taking my call. Yeah, you see, Cathy, the narrative of the so-called genocide against Afrikaners, in my view, is deliberately perpetuated by Trump administration to rebuff attention from the real genocide in Gaza inflicted by the Netanyahu regime against defenseless Palestinians in Gaza. It is a well-calculated strategy by Trump and Netanyahu administrations, to divert media houses away from Gaza and focus on Trump and Afrikaners. And believe you me, Cathy, I think so far it is mission accomplished, because very little is said lately about genocidal activities, committed by Israeli regime, despite the fact that the Netanyahu administration has actually escalated the satanic actions. If you watch visuals and you check developments, actually the situation is reaching alarming proportions, So the much-awaited meeting between Trump and our president, Cyril Ramaphosa, the likelihood, in my view, is that Trump will utilize the space to attack us for taking Israeli regime to ICJ and ICC respectively, and he might demand actually that we withdraw these cases. That is my take, among other things.
Mike, what has struck me about this situation has been perhaps the glaring silence of other actors within the global political space.
Yes.
That there is silence from other countries. There seems to be silence from even the organizations that are mandated and tasked with pursuing the interests of people who are actual refugees. And that seems to have given credibility to what the U.S. is saying. Why is it that you have few people actually calling out the fact that there is no genocide?
Very true. Very true, Cathy. This silence is deafening, as you correctly put it. It's deafening. And with developments going forward, we really wonder what is going to become of the whole situation. But let's wait and see. These are very interesting developments.
Okay, all right. Mike in Middleburg, we'll leave it there for this morning. But think about it. When you have to talk about refugees, let's say refugees fleeing South Sudan or any other areas of conflict, there are clear moral grounds for why that is the case. Why is the absurdity of what we are seeing not being called out at the highest level globally? Why is that the case? Let's take you to your latest news headlines.
Good morning, I'm Anne Musa. In the headlines, the trial of the 3 accused in the case of theft on President Cyril Ramaphosa's Palapala farm is expected to start today in the Modimolle Regional Court in Limpopo. Police are yet to confirm reports that one person has died and another injured in Diepkloof in Soweto, where residents from a hostel have looted a truck. This follows a protest related to the poor delivery of basic services. And the DA says a lack of skills and experience in the National Prosecuting Authority is seriously hampering its ability to bring successful prosecutions. I'll have details on these and other stories at 10.
We love rating things, our phones, our cars, but our health? Your health lets you do what you love with the people you love. So who are you staying healthy for, and how can you improve your health? Choose Dis-Chem Life, the life cover that helps you live a healthier, more rewarding, longer life with regular health checks. Visit dischemlife.co.za now. Dis-Chem Life. Choose a better partner for life. Dis-Chem Life is an authorized FSP 50594, underwritten by God Risk Life, a licensed life insurer, FSP 76. T's and C's apply.
Hey, want to check your TV license balance conveniently? Look no further. Our SMS service allows you to do just that. By sending a message containing your ID or TV license number to 44210, you can quickly access your balance without needing multiple inquiries or waiting on hold. Plus, standard SMS rates apply. Take advantage of this efficient method to stay informed and streamline your payment process today. T's and C's apply.
Stay ahead of the financial game. Join us tonight from 6 to 7 p.m. for an insightful journey through the day's market developments, financial updates, and investment news. Tune in for your daily dose of financial intelligence as we navigate the twists and turns of the financial landscape with expert insights on SAFM Market Update with Volvo. It's safe to be brave with Volvo.
The Talking Point with Cathy Mohlahlana. Weekdays, 9 a.m. till midday.
Good morning, Cathy. So great to hear your voice again. We really missed you. Thanks to all the stand-ins, but hey, we're missing this voice. Great to have you back, Cathy.
Good morning, Sis Katie and your producer and all the listeners of SAFM. Happy Monday, Sis Katie, and welcome back, Sissy. I like to talk regard to the president that is took the decision to elect Mr. John Steinhazel to go, and with him, it was a good and great idea. The president is intelligent, is very clever. I like that president, and is quiet. He's not making noise, but he's making things. So I wish they will have nice conversation with the President Trump and come back with the nice ideas and all those things. So yeah, that is my concert for today. Sia from Cape Town. Thank you.
Hey, good morning, Cathy, and your listeners. Cathy, as a Kaizer Chiefs supporter, I would like to congratulate Mamelodi Sundowns for winning the league in style, 8 in a row. Because if I don't congratulate them at the moment, as a supporter, no one will on your show today, because Amajita will take that space to book to be congratulated as them, because Sundowns feels like a stepchild in the South African football. Brian Mabai from Proteact, and thank you for the great show.
Good morning, was Cathy. Is it possible to invite, for you to invite Advocate Shamila Batoi to tell us the success of NPA since she got in the office? This is Anonymous from Deep Slot. Thank you.
Cathy Mohlahlana on SAFM.
Yeah, thanks for those WhatsApp voice notes. I'll agree with you, Brian. Sometimes I feel like Sundowns just doesn't get the props that they deserve. You know, they're a really, really solid team. But I guess it's that brand equity, right? That there's something about the brand that still needs working on, at least to find the kind of resonance that you do with, what shall we call them? Is it the big two? With Chiefs and Pirates, right? You just don't have that level of brand association and brand equity, at least from a public point of view. But they really are an incredible team. Yes, getting the NPA on, I think, is a very, very fair request, especially after what we heard Shamila Batoi saying on Friday before Parliament and trying to explain how they are responding to some of these cases, including the Omotosho matter, and how they are reflecting on these matters. Mtandazo, you want to stay with the matter of the NPA. Good morning.
Hi, good morning, Cathy and the listeners. How are you doing?
Doing well, Mtandazo. Go for it.
So, Cathy, you know, I listened to yourself and what you were saying in terms of looking at analyzing why is this happening with the high-profile cases, and how you were saying we should leave nothing untouched. But I feel sorry for you. I feel sorry for South Africans, because even in that, the Constitution is not allowed to be touched. I mean, I listen to the professionals, to the presenters, how they defend the Constitution, how is it's actually not even allowed to be discussed. You know, how you're not bringing experts who can argue against this Constitution, how you're not, wanting to interrogate whether this Constitution is actually at fault or not. So the system is protected by the Constitution, and the system was designed to protect the enslavers from the slaves. That is why if you are poor, you lose any type of a case. But if you are rich, it doesn't matter what you've done. So the system itself has to be interrogated. The SABC has to allow professionals that believe that this Constitution is a problem to come on board without being bastardized. Say, for instance, in this issue of Malusi Gigaba and the Zondo Commission, people have been saying that the Zondo Commission was a farce, was a joke, was a circus. But no one wants to agree with that, you see. But everyone could see that the Zondo Commission was designed for Jacob Zuma. But the moment you mention Jacob Zuma, you are out of the debate. So no one can actually interrogate what is actually happening, you see, because we have issues that are untouchable. You can't touch Zondo. You can't touch his commission. Yet you can see his commission has caused the failures, which is why the NPA is working like this, because they are protecting certain rich people. The system, the Constitution is protecting the slaver from the slaves. So you never get the justice, you see. Yes, ma'am.
Sorry about that, Mtandazo. I just want to check with you. I mean, do you genuinely believe that there is, a wholesale ineffectiveness of the Constitution, which is a document that does not implement itself, right, is implemented by people? And so when we assess and analyze whether or not it's working, that we turn our attention to how is this Constitution being implemented?
Yes.
Do you think that we've satisfied that question enough for ourselves to say we have done everything we can to implement this constitution to the letter, and we have found that doing that still leaves us an unequal country, and therefore we need to change it.
Yes, we have done everything, Cathy. We've satisfied ourselves, but we have not interrogated the other side, which is now, can we really say that this constitution works for us? I mean, you just mentioned that the justice system seems not to be working for people it's supposed to protect. It's because it's protected by the constitution. So we've done everything. You see, for instance, I'll give you just an example. The constitution wants the criminals to have their own rights. Now, the criminals are shooting witnesses in court. As soon as the witness dies, the case is out. That is why Omotoso is walking free to Nigeria, because the main witness was shot dead. You see, the constitution is protecting Omotoso, that if the witnesses are dead, you are free. You are not guilty. So we've done everything. We've seen all kinds of people playing this constitution, all the elite, all the rich. So it's time we start looking at their protection, at the document that is protecting them, the elitist, and start looking at it like how you were saying it, without leaving anything untouched, with no stone unturned. Okay. Start interrogating it thoroughly. Call professionals, call expertise that have dissenting voices, that do not agree with the mainstream, with the main line,
Yeah. Okay. All right, Mtandazo. Thanks for that view. Look, I agree with you, because what you're pointing to is the fact that there clearly is something wrong, fundamentally wrong with how our system is operating currently. And we need to be able to find out what in order to fix it. Bruce, you're in Gqeberha. Good morning.
Yes, morning, Cathy. Thanks for taking my call, and I hope you give me a little time just to debate a couple of points with you, like you gave the last listener. I just think this whole refugee thing in this with what's happening in the States and this whole is just become so confusing and so conflated, and facts are important. And what perturbs me is that the national dialogue and on this station confuses the issues all the time. Let me give you an example. You made a statement now. It seems like it's absurd. How do these people get refugee status? And you're criticizing the fact that they're not real refugees, etc. But the question of the matter is, you're conflating genocide with refugee status. So I know that you have got completely mixed up. But at the end of the day, to get refugee status, and I would ask SAFM that are meant to be the purveyors of truth, have you looked at the legislation granting this refugee status or the conditions from the state? My interpretation and understanding of a refugee is someone that has been persecuted to the extent that he no longer feels safe in his own country. Where this issue of genocide seems to have come in is because we're conflating with what Donald Trump said about genocide with the reasons why these people are leaving. Now, if you've looked at the interviews of the people that are leaving, their lives have become untenable. They've been persecuted to such an extent that they don't see a future hope to stay in this country. Now, we can call it genocide, whatever the fact is, but there's no doubt that they are being persecuted, that they fall clearly and squarely within the definition of persecution. So if you look at South Africa, our death rate, more people are killed per day in South Africa than in Gaza. And we're saying Gaza is a genocide, but South Africa's not. But I don't want to conflate genocide. So that's my first point. They are being persecuted. They fall squarely within the definition of refugees. They're considered refugees, and it's well established what the definition of refugee state is. Number two, your station keeps on referring to these people as white farmers. That's not what color is not included in this legislation. Anyone that feels persecuted that's in a minority group can make a case to fall within the thing. So why we keep on referring to them as white Afrikaners is just blatantly false. So I think for you, Cathy, the very first thing I would say to you is please go and have a look at the law that's been passed by the states to give refugee status. And the last point I'd want to make even within the definition of genocide.
Bruce, sorry, before you go
Yes?
on, before you go on,
Yes.
I need you to clarify the point
Yes.
that you're making.
Okay.
Because I
Great.
don't quite understand you right now.
Okay. Okay, so refugee status. You saying there's no genocide in South Africa. How can these people get refugee status? And I'm saying to you, the definition to qualify as a refugee has nothing. It may include genocide, but not the only grounds to qualify as a refugee.
Yes. Was the action taken by the U.S. president for these resettlements under the refugee program?
Okay.
Was the basis for that, if we're taking the U.S. president's own words, not based on the fact that he says that there's a genocide taking place in South Africa?
You're making the fundamental error, which most journalists do.
Mm-hmm.
They take something that was said in front of cameras, in front of them, and you want to apply that rationale to the basis. The basis of this legislation is a range of things. That's just one factor. Now, if you want to get into the definition of genocide, I've never heard that debate once on SAFM. What is the meaning of genocide? It may not necessarily even be killing. But that's a separate debate. What I'm saying to you is the legislation that it's the way it's currently written is if you're coloured and you're being persecuted, you can make a case. If you're part of any minority group, you can make a case for, and it's well established what the refugee status is. So we can't conflate the two. Even if you want to argue that he said this and he said and that's the basis, it's not the basis in law. You've got to separate those two issues. Otherwise, you're conflating two issues. Is that not a valid point?
Bruce, I'm going to have to. I'm going to have to go think about what you're saying.
Just look at
I don't think I necessarily agree with what you're saying. Again, because of how we have seen the events around this issue play out. And even when you talk about minority groups and who would be eligible under that definition, the reality of that points to something very different than what you're proposing here, which is that any minority group in South Africa would be able to take up this opportunity. That hasn't been the
Cathy,
position.
Not one of you at that studio, I would say, has even read that law that the U.S. passed to give the guys refugee status. Yet we're debating this thing endlessly. And the irony is that the people that have left now are being persecuted in the media, including by stations like this, including by ministers who do not want him being back. So the irony is, if you want to claim they're not being persecuted...
How are they being persecuted?
What? Have you seen the racial hatred in the media? And what's even heard on this station? I mean, the humanity, we're losing our sight of humanity. We know nothing about the stories of each one of those refugee status guys, what they've been through and their reasons. We just think, oh no, they're part of a group. It's that group, and then we demonize and we dehumanize without listening to the story of every one of them, including our president. Calling people cowards. He doesn't even know the background story of one of those people. He's calling them cowards, the biggest coward of them all. Because he can't stand up to his cadres and he can't stand up to corruption. He can't stand up to the criminals.
Okay.
80 people are being murdered a day. That's higher than some war zones, including Ukraine.
Okay.
Okay, thanks,
okay,
Cathy.
Bruce.
You've given me a lot of time.
Yeah, Bruce, out in Gqeberha. We'll leave it there for this morning. Like I said, I'll have to go reflect on what Bruce is saying. I don't 100% agree with every point that he has made this morning. Katu, you're out in Midrand. Good morning.
Good morning, Sis Cathy. I hope you're well. Bruce almost ate my time there.
Askis.
But yeah, no, it's fine. I think I want to throw a spanner in the works, just a different perspective to say South Africa, our crime rate is extremely high. Every day I start the car, I ask myself, will I make it back home? I'm sure many women will ask themselves, will I be raped today? A lot of people ask themselves these questions. And as an African black person in particular, the thing is that I can't go anywhere. Trump is not going to welcome me and call me a refugee of crime. I think the frustration is felt throughout the country. And one thing I would do right now, if I could, is ask for help from the international community for us to deal with our law enforcement. Crime is out of hand. Corruption is out of hand. The police are infiltrated with corruption. Cases don't go anywhere. From arrest to imprisonment, the stats are so low. I can't give you the percentages, but I'm just saying also as black people, we too are also victims of crime. We're victims of all these things, and we've got nowhere to go. And it's frustrating. Every day I'm anxious as a parent that will my kids be orphans because I'm going to get killed on the street. And these guys are career criminals. They know how to grease the hands of law enforcement and justice, and they get away with it, and they do it over and over and over and over again. So in my frustration, I wish we had our own every forum that could go out to the international community and ask for help for us to deal with crime. If you look at the Omotoso case, I mean, for me, it's such an insult. 32 charges, and the man walks free. He's gone. They're talking about the appeal. You're going to appeal, and you're going to struggle to get him back in the country. Look at Prophet Bushiri. He's been gone forever, and they keep on telling us that he's coming next week. We're getting him back into the country.
And I guess that probably also points to the disingenuous nature of this program, right? And, you know, our previous caller, Bruce Nkabeja, was and I've just gone to revise my memory of that of that the details of that program, and it does specify. It says you must be of Afrikaner ethnicity or be a member of a racial minority in South Africa.
Yeah.
It is the piece of legislation itself that emphasizes the Afrikaner ethnicity aspect of it. So this is not something that is being created by people out there who are looking on these individuals and not wanting to acknowledge their stories or experiences. This is how it has been crafted from the get-go, from the onset. And that's why we see the kind of reaction that we do.
100%.
Okay. Katu, I hear you loud and clear. Let's leave it there. Mike, you're Newlands. Good morning.
Yeah, good morning, Cathy. May I just quickly comment on Sam from Greyton?
Yes, yes,
thank
on
you.
Sam.
Yeah,
okay.
he just made it a point that he felt really quite insulted that he had that Malusi Gigaba is allowed to comment on such serious matters as our defence force. And I would just like to support him there. We had Cedric Frolic on SAFM the other day. He should be locked up according to the Zondo trial for taking 40,000 rand a month, but he still sits in Parliament as the chair of chairs. So I couldn't agree with him more. Getting on to your very interesting question, Cathy, is what are we going to do that we do differently? I think that was the question you asked, and you obviously make the very valid point that we just can't go on the way we are. But there's a couple of things that we just have to address because they are going to come up on Wednesday. And I'm going to put aside the genocide thing for a moment because I think that's becoming a little bit of a red herring. We need to look at the fact that the most important thing in our country, as I've often said, is unemployment. We just lost another 300,000 to 400,000 jobs according to in the last quarter, I think it was. And that surely has to be upmost in our minds. Now, how is our president going to handle these things that we need to face? We need to face the fact that we now have more race laws on our books, or near enough, I'm generalizing a bit, 164, that we should not have. We are now hiring people in this country based on the color of their skin. And we are now saying to people that, look, this is where you are going to be living in the near future because they're tackling that side of things. And our economy is completely shot. And the worst thing is the worst. How are we going to get investors into South Africa to grow when we have the minister in the presidency says live on a TV show that if you come here and you're not going to abide by our laws, which yes, they are racist, and yes, they do minimize, they do terrible things, go and invest in India. So we have a serious, serious problem in our country, and Cathy, I think we just need a big reset. We can't go on the way we are. We need to relook at the race laws. We've just got to stop that. We've got to find a better way. I'm not having a problem with the fact that the country needs to make a reset, but we can't do it based on the color of a man's skin. And I think also, just finally, Cathy, we need to stop interfering in other people's business. For us to take Israel to court, when we should just keep our head down, get on with the business of our own business, not worry about wars on the other side of the world, which have nothing to do with us. If you're going to do that, let India do it. Let Singapore, let somebody else do it. But poor old South Africa, with the highest unemployment in the world, is trying to take on America, the big bear, which quite frankly we all agree is our biggest trading partner. They invest in our country big time. India might be our biggest trading partner, but we owe them money. America owes us money and employs our people. So let's not poke the bear. Let's go to them and say, guys, what do you need from us? We'll do whatever it is, because we do not want 200 people starving to death in our country every month. Yes, Cathy?
Yeah, let's leave it there. Look, where would South Africa be if the rest of the world took that position under apartheid? Where would we be? That has never been the position of South Africa, to stay quiet in the face of injustice globally. It has never been what we have stood for as a country. Station, you're in Duduza. Good morning. Good morning, Station.
Hey, Mom Cathy, how are you?
Good. Go for it, Station.
Welcome. You know, Mom Cathy, I heard someone say Sundowns are not the stepchild. Sundowns are the real children of South Africa. You know why? Because most of the supporters are media guys who are chiefs and pirates, but in most cases chiefs, and that is why. But they'll make noise like nobody's business. Then Sundowns, this thing to them is in the DNA. They don't, sometimes even if you say congratulations or a hit, what to them, they'll be like surprised, like, what are you talking about? Said, oh, you are a child. Oh, no, that one. It's a normal thing. So we're gonna celebrate. We're gonna celebrate Sundowns well. After bringing the star next week, they are playing. This weekend they are playing first leg Pyramids at the Loftus. Let people come there to show that they are really behind Sundowns. They are not pretending. And when they bring the star, you know what? Mama Cathy, and for the big one, you know that one.
Which are you playing a song, Station?
Our very own Cocomelons, under twins. They brought it home. You know what? Now we need to celebrate. We've got every reason to forget about Americanners and everything going. America coming back doing what? No. We are talking under 20. They brought the cup. You know those boys? the passion and the dedication, determination on that field of play when they were playing Morocco away.
No, it was a brilliant game, wasn't it, Station?
No,
it was a brilliant game.
A world-class champion come back tomorrow at our Tambo. People must come there. They must fill up that our Tambo for us to welcome these boys and show them love. Minister of Sport, you've got the challenge. Accept the challenge. Let that our Tambo be bad with supporters.
Okay, Station in Duduza, let's leave it there. As for our very own Coco Melon, I wasn't expecting that. Yeah. Look, I must say I was disappointed last week when I saw how empty the airport was. When the track and field athletes came back, I was expecting more because they just did so well. And I feel like we didn't show up for them in the way that we needed to as South Africans. So I don't know, Station, if the airport is going to be packed for Amajita. I don't know. But if last week is anything to go by, my confidence isn't too high. But that's something that we can all change, right? You just make a decision, go and show up for the people that represent our country so well. All right, time for your latest news update. It's 10 o'clock.
In our top stories, Palapala farm theft trial to start and situation tense in Diepkloof amid protest action. Good morning. The trial of the 3 accused in the case of theft on President Cyril Ramaphosa's Palapala farm is expected to start today in the Modimolle Regional Court in Limpopo. Emanuela David and siblings Floriana and Indilinasho Joseph allegedly broke into Ramaphosa's farm. They then allegedly stole over $580,000 that had been hidden in a sofa. Pimani Baloy reports.
Emanuela David has been denied bail and is in police custody. The Joseph siblings were granted bail. During the pre-trial proceedings, the state indicated that it had lined up 23 witnesses. Lawyers representing the Joseph siblings told court that they would call 5 witnesses, including the 2 accused. The trio faced charges of housebreaking, theft, and conspiracy to commit housebreaking with intent to steal. Floriana Joseph worked as a domestic worker at the farm at the time of the theft. She is believed to have tipped off her co-accused about the money.
Police are yet to confirm reports that one person has died and another injured in Diepkloof in Soweto, where residents from a hostel have looted a truck. This follows a protest related to the poor delivery of basic services. Earlier, the Johannesburg Metro Police Department advised motorists to expect severe traffic disruptions due to protest action in the area. It said there were closures on the N12 eastbound and westbound at the N1 split, as well as at the N1 northbound and southbound at the N12 split. Puseletso Mukwena reports.
What's happening right now, the residents of this hostel, they are obviously taking the tin fishes that were thrown when a truck was trying to pass with force. We know that today the residents in this place, they are protesting over sanitation issues, and we understand that this is not the first time this thing happened here at this hostel. What happened was a truck trying to pass through. They have barricaded the roads with big stones. So the big truck that was holding these tin fishes was trying to pass with a force.
The DA says a lack of skills and experience in the National Prosecuting Authority is seriously hampering its ability to bring successful prosecutions. This after the High Court in Gqeberha, the Eastern Cape, acquitted Nigerian televangelist Timothy Omotoso and 2 others last month. They faced over 30 charges, including rape, human trafficking and racketeering. DA spokesperson on Justice and Constitutional Development, Advocate Glenys Breitenbach.
One of the reasons is that as soon as people become skilled, experienced, they get poached by private enterprise because they can pay so much more. But the fact of the matter is that prosecuting is a job that you learn on the job. You can't learn it at university. It doesn't matter how well qualified you are. Prosecuting is a job that you learn by doing it. And the people who have had all that expertise are now retiring. And those skills are not being retained in any formal fashion. And the young prosecutors have nobody to learn from. So there's a lack of skills, there's a lack of experience, there's a lack of exposure. And this is starting to show in the way that big matters are being handled.
The NPA meanwhile says it will proceed with the appeal of Omotoso's acquittal. He returned to Nigeria yesterday. Omotoso voluntarily opted to be deported after immigration authorities arrested him in East London earlier this month. The NPA says the law does not require active participation or presence of an accused person during a court's hearing of an appeal. It says if the appeal succeeds, it will apply for Omotoso's extradition. And finally, Israel says it's ready to allow a limited amount of food into Gaza, ending a 10-week blockade that's brought the territory to the brink of famine. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said a starvation crisis would jeopardize the renewed military offensive against Hamas. The announcement comes after pressure from the US Extensive Israeli ground operations have begun across Gaza and deadly airstrikes continued overnight. The BBC's Yolanda Nell has the details.
With global experts warning of famine, Israel's continuing blockade of Gaza, which it said was to put pressure on Hamas, has caused an international outcry. While Israel insists it's sticking to its controversial plans for a new aid system, for now, the UN, which has supplies piled up at Gaza's crossings, has confirmed that it's been approached about resuming deliveries. Israel's military is continuing its most extensive ground operations since ending a ceasefire 2 months ago.
Recapping the top story, the trial of the 3 accused in the case of theft on President Cyril Ramaphosa's Phalaphala farm is expected to start today in the Modimolle Regional Court in Limpopo. For SAFM News, I am Anne Musa.
Whether it is a CCMA referral, problems with a mechanic, or unfair blacklisting, Clientele legal plans are affordable, and you receive up to 670,000 rands worth of legal services per year. We cover civil, criminal, and labor-related matters. Our legal team will be your support 24 hours a day. SMS SAFM to 32195. That's SAFM to 32195. Clientele General is an authorized FSP and a licensed non-life insurer. T's and C's online. Standard rates apply.
He's short, loud, and definitely not a licensed therapist, but he's asking the hard questions. It's Heart to Heart with Kevin, the only talk show where the guests spill the tea and Kevin spills the jokes. Real talk, real laughs, and real short host. Heart to Heart with Kevin, Wednesdays at 7 p.m. on S3.
This May, SAFM celebrates Africa Month with you as we honor the legacy of the Organization of African Unity. We bring you rich conversations and the vibrant sounds of Africa. Music that moves the soul. This is SAFM.
The Talking Point with Cathy Mohlahlana. Weekdays, 9 a.m. till midday.
You're listening to The Talking Point. Welcome to the second hour of the show. It's 8 after 10 o'clock. And of course, we continue to lead conversations that move us right here on SAFM. Coming up in this hour, we're going to be focusing on the trip to the U.S. by President Cyril Ramaphosa alongside an envoy of ministers that are accompanying him on this trip. And we asked the question, well, what exactly are they going to be walking into? We'll do this through the perspective of some of the guests that we've lined up for you this hour, including Mwelezi Mbeki, Solimuyeng, and Amanda Koza. Before we do that, a couple of your WhatsApp voice notes from the open line.
Good morning, Cathy. Welcome back, Cathy, for the tracker. I just want to say congratulations to Amajita. Well done. Cathy, I don't know if you can get somebody from Capitec. Recently, my wife's bank account, there was a deduction of about 4,000 rand. It was taken from her bank account. And Capitec claims she subscribed to some Google stuff, but she didn't. And the money's gone. So I don't know why Capitec, their systems cannot protect their customers.
Hi, Cathy. This is Mtembu from Kabech. I just want to ask, is there any way at all that we can mobilize or lobby government to do away with the ministerial handbook, where ministers get so many perks? I mean, how does it make any sense for us as taxpayers to pay 5,000 towards the minister's bill in water. I mean, really, it is this whole system is just tone deaf, where many people can't even afford to buy electricity for 100 rand. Tembu, Quebec.
Good morning, Bishop Mapana from Leboa Home Zone F. Welcome back, Cathy. Happy Monday. Look, I just want to give a shout out to Amachita for making sure that they take the cup. They made us proud. Sundowns, 8 consecutive wins. That's the best it could ever have in the world. I think they are the second after Juventus. Now, we must also celebrate Van Niekerk and this man who has broke Usain Bolt's record, something. I mean, our South Africans are very delighted to be happy dealing with these issues.
Cathy Mohlahlana on SAFM.
Marawai, why did you think you could change your tire when you've never even changed a light bulb successfully? Marawai, why not switch to Santam and get 24/7 roadside assistance to get you moving again? Choose the insurer with cover options that suit your needs. Call 0860 444 444 or SMS cover to 36101. Santam. This is freedom. Santam is an authorized FSP, a licensed non-life insurer and controlling company for its group companies.
No matter our abilities, we can all play together.
It's always time to play on Takalani Sesame.
Wow! I love this game! Learning new things is the best part about having a friend who knows something you don't know.
Oh, yay!
We are all special in our own way.
Tune in to see what makes you special for the all-new episodes of Takalani Sesame. Weekdays at 3 p.m. on SABC2.
Bridget Masinga on SAFM.
You make it seem so easy. Get on a plane today and decide, I want to work from Egypt tomorrow. Let me go.
I meet so many people who have read Vagabond and they keep saying to me, Lerato, I read your book and I traveled. I read your book and I went to Lake Kivu. I read your book, I started listening to Salif Keita's music and sparked curiosity. So I know that people are traveling. We are very warm and welcoming. The number of times I've walked into weddings, into parties, and I do not know anyone, and everyone keeps asking, who are you? Where are you from? Like, I heard the music and I came to dance.
The Full Circle with Bridget Masinga, Monday to Friday, 1 to 3 p.m.
The Talking Point with Cathy Mohlahlana, weekdays 9 a.m. till midday.
President Cyril Ramaphosa says he's not worried about his upcoming visit to the United States amid accusations of genocide against white Afrikaners. He was speaking ahead of that working visit with his counterpart, U.S. President Donald Trump, the presidency announcing that he'll be accompanied by 4 ministers, including Ronald Lamola Kumbuzon-Chaveni, Pax Tau, and John Steenhuisen. The big question on many South Africans' minds is, what will the president be walking into and what approach should he be taking to this particular visit? Let's listen to what he has had to say.
We've got a number of issues to discuss: trade issues, diplomatic issues, and relationship issues. So we are not going to be distracted by anything. We will just focus on what is important for our country. Trade, they have imposed tariffs on us, even though they've postponed them. We need to deal with that. We do quite a bit of trade with the United States. Our vehicles go there, our vegetables and our agricultural products go there. So they are our trading partner, and we therefore need to interact with them. Whether we like it or not, we are joined at the hip and we need to be talking to them. And you don't talk to your friends or negotiate anything with your friends. You also negotiate with those that you may have differences with. So that's how we are going to approach these discussions. We all know as South Africans, both black and white, that there is no genocide here. We are not committing any act of hatred, act of retribution against or violence against anyone who is a citizen, even if they are not citizens of our country. We are not made that way. So we will obviously, if this matter comes up, we will make that extremely clear. Every South African knows and agrees that there's no genocide here. We are a peace-loving country, a country that is committed to transformation, to ensuring that the people of our country have a better life, and all of them for that matter.
Well, to unpack this conversation further, let me welcome onto the show Moeletsi Mbeki, political analyst and chairperson of the South African Institute of International Affairs. Mr. Mbeki, good morning to you.
Morning, Cathy.
Sole Moyeng is a brand reputation management advisor and managing director of corporate communications at Don Valley. Sole, good morning.
Good morning, Cathy, and to my fellow panelists.
And Amanda Koza is the News 24 presidency and executive reporter. Amanda, good morning.
Good morning, Cathy, and to my fellow panelists.
So, to perhaps form a basis for the discussion we're about to have, Moeletsi, I'm going to begin with you, and perhaps in your own words, if you can help us see the extent to which, and if you believe, as a country, we have been able to identify and articulate what the problem with our relationship with the U.S. is that has resulted in the situation we find ourselves in today.
Well, Cathy, the South African government, and of course, especially President Ramaphosa, they completely misunderstand what the problem is. They don't understand at all what it is that the Americans are concerned about in terms of South Africa. The President Ramaphosa, you have just played a talk from him about his concern about showing there's no genocide. There is his concern about trade issues. The Americans know there is no genocide in South Africa. What the Americans are concerned about, primarily two things to do with South Africa. South Africa, in the eyes of the Americans, and I must add the British here, and if we have time, we can look at the British dimension. In the eyes of the Americans, South Africa is part of the West. And it has been part of the West since the middle of the 17th century when the Dutch came to South Africa. So from the middle of the 17th century right up to 1994, all the South African governments have seen themselves as part of the West, have participated in the wars of the West against the enemies of the West, like the Nazis and so on, the communists in Korea, the Chinese communists in Korea, and so on. South Africa has been part of the West for these centuries. Now, when the ANC government came in, initially under Mandela and Thabo Mbeki, they accepted that South Africa was part of the West, although they said it was non-aligned. But essentially, it was a very mild non-alignment. It was part of the West. So if you look at the arms procurement that South Africa undertook during Mandela and Thabo Mbeki's presidencies, all the arms that we bought, the submarines, the frigates, the fighter jets, the helicopter are all NATO compatible. Why were they NATO compatible? Because those two administrations saw South Africa as part of the West. Now, since Jacob Zuma came in and then Ramaphosa, they have been moving South Africa to become part of the China-Russia side of the globe. So that is what the Americans are concerned about, to bring South Africa back into the Western camp. So all the noise you hear about genocide, about all this, is to get the government of South Africa follow a false trail, so that they don't fully understand what the United States is after. The second part is that since South Africa in the Zuma and the Ramaphosa administrations has become near allies of what America considers to be its enemies, or what the West considers to be its enemies, that is China and Russia. They are preparing a group that will oppose the ANC in particular. That is why they are interested in the Afrikaner right wing. They are trying to shape the Afrikaner right wing so that they use the Afrikaner right wing against the ANC. So these are the two primary concerns which our government has completely failed to understand. And I must add the last one, which is our minerals. The Americans want South Africa's minerals to be controlled either by South African companies or by Western companies or by both. What they have seen happen under Zuma and Ramaphosa is the Chinese taking control of the strategic minerals of South Africa, in particular the chrome mining industry. The Chinese have bought the largest chrome mining company in South Africa called Samanco. And the Americans are very unhappy about, because Samanco produces chrome, which is used for making of stainless steel, which of course goes into armaments and all sorts of strategic industry. So those are the three primary issues that the talks are all about. And President Ramaphosa will be shocked when it comes to Trump, and Trump won't be talking about genocide or anything like that. You were talking about these three issues.
When we look at the situation, and I guess also based on what you have said, just firstly on the point of South Africa having been seen to be an extension of the West, and what the move around South-to-South relations has meant, or what it has signaled to the West, how much of it is about a real shift, Moeletsi, and what of it is perceived? Because often when we talk about these South-to-South relations, when we interrogate what that means in real terms, including from an economic value point of view, there's still a lot more that could be leveraged. So what is really getting on, I don't want to say on the nerves of the US about it, in a way that wasn't before? Because in real terms, there hasn't been any fundamental shift in how we engage with or associate with these countries, save for what has been said publicly via BRICS and, the general rhetoric that comes out of these engagements sometimes.
Well, there has been a major shift. For example, if you remember the incidents of Lady R, the Russian ship which was under some kind of a banning order from the Americans because of the war in Ukraine and the role that ship was playing. Now notwithstanding that the ship was under America's banning order for sanctions, the South African government allowed it into what the West considers to be its own asset, which is the naval base in Simonstown. Remember your school history. Why did Van Riebeeck come to South Africa to set up? He came to South Africa to set up a strategic control of the sea route to Asia, to manage that trade. Now, by allowing Lady R into Simonstown, in the eyes of the Americans, we are opening up what in their view is a Western asset, which is Simonstown Naval Base, to their enemies, which is Russia and China. So it's not just perception, it's reality. That is what they see the situation. And as I have mentioned, the South African strategic minerals, and if you look into the comprehensive anti-apartheid act that the American passed against the apartheid regime, it exempted a number of minerals from sanctions, which they call strategic minerals. They are now called critical minerals. Now, China has taken control of the chrome side already. So there has been a change under the Ramaphosa and the Jacob Zuma administrations. So that's what they're concerned about. It's not perception. It's reality in their view that the South African, the ANC and the ANC government is becoming an ally of what the West considers to be their enemy.
Amanda, when we look at the reporting around this fallout, this tension between the U.S. and South Africa, many of the examples that have been cited by Moeletsi are often not mentioned, at least from an official point of view. Do we run the risk here of going into these meetings without that clarity of thought and even depth of understanding of what's really at play?
I think we do, Cathy, because it does sound like to a certain extent they are also they are on a fact-finding mission too. They're not really sure what exactly is the problem. Certainly the things that we thought were a problem were also things like the ICJ, South Africa taking Israel to the International Court over the Palestine and Israel matter. That was one of the things that we were told could have been one of the issues. You remember the former ambassador, Ibrahim Rasool, saying, we will not withdraw that case. So it sounded like to us those were one of the things that were being discussed while he was there, is that one of the things that the Americans wanted was for us to withdraw our case. It's going to be very interesting. I do think that we will be shocked to learn the extent of how deep the problem is. Certainly the U.S. wants to be or remain that superpower, like Moeletsi said, and the threat of China and us flirting with these other, or our relations with these countries they perceive as our enemies. So I'm not sure how far President Trump is going to go in terms of ultimatums to make him change his posture. But we'll see on Wednesday.
Yeah, we're going to continue with this conversation shortly. Lots more to unpack in as far as this visit to the U.S. by the President of the Republic with his ministers. It's now 10:30, time for the latest news headlines.
Thank you, Cathy. On the news headlines on SAFM, I am Ondilambana, and a very good morning. Police have confirmed that 2 people have died and 1 is seriously injured during a violent protest in Diepkloof, Soweto. Protesting residents looted a delivery truck that was passing through the area on its way to deliver canned fish. EFF members and supporters have started to march from the union buildings to the offices of National Treasury in Pretoria. The party's national chairperson, Nontando Noluchungu, says their VAT victory march is about the rights of the poor. And the trial of the 3 accused in the case of theft on President Cyril Ramaphosa's Phalaphala farm is expected to start today in the Modimolle Regional Court in Limpopo. A full update follows at the top of the hour.
Taking a look at your markets this morning, the rand currently trading at 17 rand 99 to the dollar, 24 rand 01 to the pound, and 20 rand 22 to the euro. Markets in Asia were mostly negative at the closing bell. The JSE mainly lower during mid-morning trade. Markets in Europe have extended losses. Gold is trading at $3,233, platinum $986 per ounce. The price of Brent crude oil is at $65.11 a barrel.
He's short, loud, and definitely not a licensed therapist, but he's asking the hard questions. It's Heart to Heart with Kevin, the only talk show where the guests spill the tea and Kevin spills the jokes. Real talk, real laughs, and real short host. Heart to Heart with Kevin, Wednesdays at 7 p.m. on S3.
Cathy Mohlahlana on SAFM.
You're listening to The Talking Point. We continue leading conversations that move us. We're unpacking this trip to the U.S. by the country's President Cyril Ramaphosa alongside various ministers to go and ease tensions with the U.S. Waleed Mbeki is a political analyst. One of our guests this morning, Solim Muyeng, is a brand reputation management expert, and Amanda Koza, News 24 presidency and executive reporter. Solim, I'm going to come to you in a moment. Amanda, when you look at the communication around this trip coming out of the presidency and also what some of these ministers may have to say, John Steenhuisen is part of this delegation, absolutely not lost, I think, at least on me and many others, I'm sure, that there would be positions that he would want to also articulate on behalf of his party, which is part of the GNU, that has made it clear that they don't always agree with the president or the positions that the presidency takes. But from what has been said publicly, do you get a sense that there is going to be sort of singing from the same hymn book in those meetings, or is there room that even in those meetings there's a likelihood for the president to say one thing and a John Steenhuisen to say something different?
I think we cannot afford that as a country, to be honest. I do get a sense that they would have obviously met and strategized on this is the deal. This is the deal that we want to come out of. This is what we want out of this meeting. And I certainly hope that they'll be singing from the same hymn book, because it's going to look a bit clumsy. Where you have a minister saying something else and the president is trying to negotiate something, a different package. I do get a sense that this time around we cannot afford it. We just cannot afford it. There's a lot at stake.
Solly, when we look at the imaging around South Africa, of course you have headlines in America talking about refugees coming out of this country as a result of genocide that is taking place, allegedly, right? At the same time, it has been months of this onslaught, if we can put it that way, in the press of a South African government that largely looks disorganized, really on the back foot when it comes to responding to the messaging, the crafting of the narrative coming out of the U.S. And it's a narrative that they're very much in charge of.
Yeah, but I think, Cathy, the problem is that we, South Africa, and I'm looking at South Africa as a branded destination, but we are not united behind the government, and we have reason not to be to be united. A lot of the problems that were cited by Donald Trump as administration in recent months are problems that have been around for years. I mean, many South Africans have been leaving this country quietly because of, their children not being allowed into institutions because they are not of the right color and that sort of thing. It's true. These things are happening. So I think I'm just fearing that we're going to respond to this thing in some kind of misplaced sense of patriotism. But the beneficiaries of winning on that basis would be the status quo, would be the people who are running this country. And I think that it's important that we as South Africans, it's a pity that we haven't had an opportunity for a dialogue, for a national dialogue, where that is not controlled by the ANC or any one political party, where we agreed what do we want 31 years after 1994, what do we South Africans across the board want? Almost go back to 1955, ahead of the formation of the Freedom Charter. What do we want? And then how do we ensure that the government that is elected represents all of the people? Because right now it seems like the ANC is trying really hard to they see the national government of unity thing as a hiccup. You know what I'm saying? Something that will come and go. So, but Americans are not foolish. The Americans, they know what's going on. They have spies in South Africa. They have all sorts of representatives, media. They have, one would assume that even the military boat, the Navy ship from Russia would not have traveled all the way to Somerstown without somebody watching it. They know, and not everything that they know is out there. I think Molet is absolutely correct. So the team from South Africa is going to be surprised. We need to be clear, what do we stand for? What message are we going to communicate there on behalf of whom? I'd be fine with staying here and providing a dissenting view, because I don't think that we should go there and defend the ANC status quo. I don't think we should do that. I think we should define a way to defend South Africa, but which South Africa? Are we defending South Africa, the ANC's hegemony over South African politics? Because maybe the Donald Trump kick in the barn is something we needed after all, in some level. Of course, it's combined, its narrative is made up of lies and truth. There's no genocide in South Africa for sure, but there are many laws that South Africans have been complaining about over the years, and the ANC is holding on. The ANC wants to control all these things. The ANC sees this as just a little thing that it'll go over. We cannot afford to have one-party dominance, especially ANC dominance, into the future for such a diverse country. So we South Africans need to determine, what are we defending? Are we being emotionally bludgeoned into some misplaced patriotism against Trump at the cost of what? That's the discussion we should be having.
The reality, Sol, is that on the point that you're raising around the many issues that South Africans grapple with on a day-to-day basis, whether we're talking triple BEE, whether we're talking the high levels of crime, these are domestic issues, right? And we're talking about an engagement between two heads of state where there would be a respect around the sovereignty of both those parties. So to what extent then would a question around triple BEE, for example, even be something that would find its way in those discussions? And I'm pointing here to what you're saying about how it should be used as an opportunity to have South Africa reckon and deal with some of the domestic issues that people have been raising. Is it not the wrong platform?
Well, no. If you during apartheid, many South Africans, anti-apartheid fighters, left because their government at the time was not listening to them. They refused to listen to them. They even went into armed struggle because they were not listened to. So you can't today say people who are not happy here in South Africa shouldn't have no right to go out there and articulate domestic, what you call sovereignty or domestic issues outside into the world and seek help the same way that people fought against apartheid went to look for help outside. I think that we no longer have one party dominance in South Africa. It's very important that whatever we articulate out there, the political stakes are high. We mustn't be naive about this in South Africa. I think that it's important that whatever we articulate out there is something that can be supported by a broad majority of South Africans across the board, not just one section of the nation. And right now, I just care. It's almost like a sweet and sour kind of event happening. I think it's important. I think that maybe we did need a bit of a kick in the butt, as I said, so that we can look inside and say what do we really want to stand for in South Africa from 2025 onwards. We can't go there on a false sense of nationhood, of patriotism, when South Africans are in pain. I mean, we cannot afford to do that. We need to have a conversation that says, what do we want? What does the government that is elected to represent South Africa articulate out their own foreign policy on trade, who benefits, who doesn't get to benefit, so that when in the future these things happen, we know that the people that go there are not speaking for any one or two political parties, but for the nation, and we're not there yet. And I think this should not be a missed opportunity for South Africa to have these difficult conversations. I don't think that actually anything should be off the table. I really don't think so. Of course, I want South Africa to win. I want the team to come back here and with a strengthened relationship with America for the reasons that Moeletsi mentioned. We are tied to the hip with America, with the West, on a lot of things. China comes here to extract natural resources. America, we send to America finished goods. We don't want to lose that opportunity to continue growing the number of finished goods and products that we send to America, or stuff that, especially things that get beneficiated in South Africa, get sent out. We want that relationship, but at what cost do you want that relationship if there's so much pain in-house, inside South Africa, that the existing dominant political elite refuses to listen to?
Moeletsi, all of these expectations that are coming up, and I think that Soli in part of what he's saying is articulating that all of these different expectations for what this meeting could be. I go back to what you said when we started, and I think half of it is not even going to feature. Or will it?
Yeah. Yes, what gets lost? The Americans want the South African economy to work. There's been lots of discussion about South Africa being kicked out of AGOA, the trade, the duty-free entry of South African goods into the American economy. The Americans don't want to kick South Africa out of AGOA. They want the South African economy to work because the South African economy delivers strategic minerals to the United States economy. But policies like black economic empowerment are obstructing the South African economy from being efficient, from working efficiently. That's why the Americans are raising issues like black economic empowerment. People think, or the ANC, let me say, thinks that it's because, Donald Trump is white, Donald Trump is a racist. That's what, our ambassador to America said. This man is a racist, therefore he wants the whites in South Africa to control the economy. You see that the ANC is trapped in the past. It is absolutely trapped in the past. The Americans want an efficient, modern South African economy to produce what the Americans want, primarily the minerals, but secondly, we have over 600 American companies that are operating in South Africa. The Americans want those companies to be profitable, which means they want the railway system in South Africa that their own American companies in South Africa need to use. They want the railway system to work. The Americans, just to give you an example, Cathy, the Americans are now rebuilding the Lobito copper belt line, the line from what is called the Benguela line, from Lobito to the copper belt. Why? Because South Africa, they were looking to South Africa to rehabilitate the railway infrastructure of the SADC region. but instead we have collapsed our own railway infrastructure. So that is the reality of the world, and the ANC leadership is living in the past. They think the United States is a white country, and therefore they think the South African economy is owned by whites, and so when you are living in a past like the way where the ANC is, you have no understanding about where the world really is. And the Americans are coming with a big stake because South Africa is important to the Americans. Now they're coming to a big stake to the ANC and say, now you have to, they're going to prescribe to Cyril Ramaphosa, by the way. They're going to tell him what he has to do. And if he doesn't do it, they will treat him like they treated Zelensky. You remember what they did to Zelensky? Zelensky said, you can't have my minerals. The Americans put him in front of the media and in front of the cameras and dressed him down and threatened him. And in the end, Zelensky had to deliver the minerals on the American terms. This is what happens to you if you don't understand the global environment in which you are working in. The ANC doesn't understand the global environment in which South Africa is a player.
Part of the process and how it has unfolded, Mweletsi, one would think that these could very well have been issues that were resolved behind closed doors. Why was that not the case? And is there intent, and has there been intent, to publicly humiliate and discredit the South African government, and obviously also playing to the fact that there are all of these issues that exist in South Africa, where there is great discontent about the state of affairs and the promise of what we could have been versus what we are?
But you see, the South African government is hugely divided. We have a government of national unity, which comprises 10 political parties. And they are not talking to each other. What we have seen during the fiasco about drawing up a budget, it has become very clear for the whole world to see that the ANC is not talking to the DA, is not talking to FF Plus, is not talking to Rise Mzansi, and so on and so forth. So the consequence is that the ANC is not listening. It's listening to itself. And now, but this lack of conversation within the South African government, because at the end of the day, the government of national unity is the South African government. But if the South African government is in disarray, which it is, because the budget shows that the ANC, the South African government, is in complete disarray. It has to be run by the courts. The courts have to tell it, don't put VAT, don't do this, don't do the other. And that is one of our big problems. Now, in a world that is so unsafe, that is at war, the countries that have big interests in South Africa are saying we have to change the situation. The other country I mentioned is Britain. In the 1980s, the British government told me, and I used to be in the Commonwealth Sanctions Technical Committee, they told me they cannot impose sanctions on South Africa because they have 800,000 people of British descent living in South Africa. And if the South African economy collapses, these people will become refugees. They will lose all their assets. So there are other countries with huge interest in South Africa that we are not talking to, and we don't understand, or the ANC doesn't understand what the interests of those countries are and what our own interests are in those countries. And that is the crux of our problem.
Sure, quite a mouthful there. We're going to continue the conversation shortly. We're going to take a quick break.
Join us this Tuesday evening at 7:30 for the latest series of SAFTA award-winning reality show, The Tastemaster SA.
Today's theme is all about bread. I love making bread. I am shaking my boots. What a page. We got this, we got this. Oh, that didn't sound convincing. I'm feeling a little stressed. I'm not going to mess this one up.
That's The Tastemaster SA. Tuesdays at 7:30, repeat Sundays at 4. Only on SABC2.
Night Talk with Oliver Dixon.
When leaders need to account, we call on them. When society needs to debate, reflect, and advance, we're here to have the conversation. Join me, Oliver Dixon, on Night Talk every Monday to Thursday from 10 to 12 midnight.
The Talking Point with Cathy Mohlahlana. Weekdays, 9 a.m. till midday.
All right, different perspectives then of this meeting with the U.S. president that President Ramaphosa has embarked on. Amanda, let's talk about what we know about the itinerary. For a long time now, at least as publicly reported, there has been these, talks that South Africa does not have access to the right corridors in Washington. Now that the president will finally be in the U.S., what do we know about how they're going to be maximizing on this moment?
Thanks, Cathy. We were actually discussing this in dialogue to say usually when the president undertakes a working visit or a state visit, they will release a program of some sort. Up until now, we are not really sure, other than Wednesday's meeting, which has been set between the two heads of state, we're not really sure who else the president will be engaging. I'm thinking because we'll be taking the special envoy, Mr. Mcebisi Jonas, and the investment advisor. Business is also going to be key to have discussions with either the chamber that side or some sort of formal structure to have discussions between us and the U.S. I'm thinking we might engage civil society to again, drill down that message that there is no genocide happening in South Africa. But critically is that meeting between the two heads of state, because they have had phone calls, but the president has said previously that he thought he made it clear to him that there was no genocide. I don't want to lie to you. As far as the presidency, my last conversation with the spokesperson, he had said the only thing that has been set down, depending on the time, they will then have other engagements. But those are the two that I know for a fact might happen. It's the Wednesday's meeting that's already been set, and I'm also thinking that they will speak to business when they're that side.
Solly, how to maximize the moment then for team or even brand South Africa? Just the idea, as Moelit was alluding to, the imagery of a Zelensky being dressed down, that would not be a good look for South Africa or even for our president. How do we avoid that?
There was a time when South Africa, the South African government, especially under Mandela, and I think Mbeki to an extent, had very good friends in America, in Washington, people who were integrated into the political community there, who were able to say, hey, these are the issues and these are the people to speak to, almost lobbying for South Africa. And I really do hope that South Africa, the current South African government, has got people inside the system, not South Africans, not activists on the ground, but people who are able to say, guys, ahead of your meeting, these are the points you need to prepare for. This is what the administration expects. These things often help to make sure that, meetings such as the ones that's coming up on Wednesday are not a waste of time. South Africans need to be clear about the other stuff that Moelet mentioned. that are not in the papers that America is concerned about. They need insiders to brief them, and I really do hope. Obviously, these things would not be put in the papers, in the media, but I really do hope that is happening. It's true that South Africa has claimed to be none, and this is my last point. It has claimed to be non-aligned, but its actions have not been non-aligned over time. I think South Africa needs to go back. South Africa is a country that will always have a voice in global affairs, and I think it needs to play that card really well. We mustn't put emotions in foreign policy or trade affairs. We mustn't look for love in the wrong places. We agree with the EU on some things, disagree with them on other things, and so it should be the case with China, with Russia, with other players. Otherwise, if we give all our support and emotionally to one group because they didn't colonize us or we think they love us, we're making a big mistake, because that's not, love and emotions don't play in foreign policy. And I think the ANC is too stuck in archaic, with these people love us, they didn't colonize us kind of syndrome. I think we need to move away from that. I really do hope these guys go in there prepared. They must have clear things they want to communicate. They're not just going to the principal's office to answer questions. They must go in there to say, these are the things that we like, and this is how we offer them. But the ANC, Moeletsi is correct. They need to move into 2025.
Moeletsi, let me then come to you. Earlier, you mentioned something, and I thought it's quite important about the role of the U.S. in preparing a group to oppose the ANC within South Africa. What role then does this meeting play, and how are we likely to see that playing out?
Well, the Americans definitely have identified the right wing in the Afrikaans-speaking population as very hostile to the ANC and has been very aggrieved against ANC's policies on things like expropriation of land and so on. Now, the Americans are strategists. They are not sentimental like the ANC is. They have decided they are going to use this group to achieve their objectives, which is to undermine the ANC. Now, we all think these people are going to be refugees working on the farm somewhere. Well, they are not going to be refugees working on the farm somewhere. They are going to be debriefed by the American intelligence services. They are going to be directed by the Americans and organized on how they can use them against the ANC and, if needs be, against sections of the South African government that the Americans feel are against American interests. So that is the issue. The ANC should be talking to Flip Bayes and to the other Afrikaners, right-wing Afrikaners, and shouldn't be passing laws like Bella laws, which are aggravating the lower classes amongst the Afrikaner population, because now they are handing over the right-wing Afrikaner populations to potential use and abuse by foreigners.
Sure. I wish we still had more time for this conversation. But Moeletsi, maybe then let me round it off with this question. So then, this week is not about a deal to be struck. It's not about what is the carrot that President Ramaphosa will dangle before Donald Trump that will make him bite and leave South Africa alone.
No, what this week is about bringing South Africa back into the Western camp. And the role model for South Africa is India. The Americans will tell Ramaphosa, go and sit down with Prime Minister Modi and learn from him how to be pro-West and part of the West and be non-aligned at the same time. That's what this meeting is all about this week.
All right. Let me thank all of my guests for coming onto the show, sharing their different insights, different perspective. Yes, I know. You won't agree with everything that they have said. I also know we didn't take calls, so you haven't had an opportunity to have your say, but please write it all down. We can continue to tackle it tomorrow morning on the open line. I promise to give you the opportunity to do that, but it gives us 24 hours at least to reflect on some of the sentiments that have been shared. On that note, it's 11 o'clock, time for your latest news update.
Thank you, Cathy. Top stories at 11. 2 dead in Dibkloof violent protest, and Israel to allow basic amount of food into Gaza. For SAFM News, I am Ondelambana, and a very good morning. Police have confirmed that 2 people have died and 1 has been seriously injured during a violent protest in Dibkloof, Soweto. Protesting residents looted a delivery truck which was passing through the area on its way to deliver canned fish. Reports say the truck driver ran over 2 of the people, killing 1 as he tried to avoid the protesters. In another incident earlier, the 3rd person died after being hit by a car. The residents are demanding an improved delivery of basic services such as water and sanitation. This has caused traffic congestion in the area. Police spokesperson Mavela Masondo.
So far, we've got 2 people who are confirmed dead. The information that we got is that as they were protesting in the early hours of this morning, around about 5 o'clock, one of the protesters was run over by a car on the freeway, and that person was taken to hospital. So we received a report that he was certified dead on arrival at the hospital. And the second incident, I just spoke to the driver. So what he's saying is that as he was trying to move out of the hostel, he ran over 2 people, which is a male and a female.
EFF members and supporters have started to march from the union buildings to the offices of National Treasury in Pretoria. The party's national chairperson, Nontando Noluchungu, says their VAT Victory March is about the rights of the poor. It comes 2 days before Finance Minister Enoch Godongwana's delivery of the 2025 budget. Noluchungu says the aim of today's march is to also demonstrate their appreciation of the scrapping of the VAT increase.
So today we are not only celebrating the victory, we are also here to reaffirm our stance against the increase of VAT and against the austerity measures that will affect the poor. Because you will know that any austerity measures, the first portfolios that they gun for, it is education, it is health, it is, all those portfolios that affect the poor.
The trial of the 3 accused in the case of theft on President Cyril Ramaphosa's Palapala farm is expected to start today in the Mudimule Regional Court in Limpopo. Emanuela David and siblings Floriana and Ndilinasho Joseph allegedly broke into Ramaphosa's farm. They then allegedly stole over $580,000 that had been hidden in a sofa. Pimani Baloyi reports.
Emanuela David has been denied bail and is in police custody. The Joseph siblings were granted bail. During the pre-trial proceedings, the state indicated that it had lined up 23 witnesses. Lawyers representing the Joseph siblings told court that they would call 5 witnesses, including the 2 accused. The trio faced charges of housebreaking, theft, and conspiracy to commit housebreaking with intent to steal. Floriana Joseph worked as a domestic worker at the farm at the time of the theft. She is believed to have tipped off her co-accused about the money.
Meanwhile, as President Ramaphosa jets off to Washington, D.C. for a highly anticipated face-to-face meeting with his U.S. counterpart Donald Trump, the stakes couldn't be higher. Trump has shredded a strategic relationship by signing an executive order and making allegations against the South African government, including discriminating against white Afrikaners. South Africa's pushback has been firm as it avoids ruining an important economic partnership, Sherwin Bryce Pease reports.
If their meeting is televised, then it's a no-brainer. It'll be hard not to watch.
After all, this is a strained relationship with differences that have tested the partnership in recent months. And how the two heads of state managed that in front of a room full of senior aides and journalists lobbing questions on all topics could make for an interesting fly-on-the-wall scenario. It's live reality TV, and the stage is the Oval Office. When to pivot, maybe a frown, a smile, even a nod. Ask Zelensky, Carney, Maloney would have some thoughts. It's a show with expectations of a performance.
Israel says it's ready to allow a limited amount of food into Gaza, ending a 10-week blockade that's brought the territory to the brink of famine. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said a starvation crisis would jeopardize the renewed military offensive against Hamas. The announcement comes after pressure from the U.S. Extensive Israeli ground operations have begun across Gaza and deadly airstrikes continued overnight. Recapping the top story, police have confirmed that 2 people have died and 1 is seriously injured during a violent protest in Dipkloof, Soweto. I'm Mondelambana for SFM News Headlines at 11:30.
The Talking Point with Cathy Mohlahlana. Weekdays, 9 a.m. till midday.
Hi, Kathy. Thank you so much for inviting Melody Mbeki to the studio to hear his analysis and what he's going to talk about. Because that guy, he's very, very good because he's a critical politician. And then he tells the truth. And then it's lucky just because he's very much creative. And he fear no one. Thank you so much. My name is Les.
Good morning, Kathy. Kathy, I totally agree with let's make it there. This is not about the genocide of white farmers here in South Africa. This is about South Africa aligning itself with countries like China and Russia, who are enemies of the Americans. That is not. That is not. It's making Americans to feel unhappy about. They are not happy with this. That is why they want us to choose whether we choose them or we choose their enemies like China. They are trying to do that, to choose one. We can't have both of them, both China and the USA. That's why they are making these allegations of genocide. It is another way of telling us that you either choose us or you choose China. This is about big nations fighting, using us as a battlefield.
Hi, this is Cathy. I've seen a lot of people questioning why our government is going to the U.S. to answer for the allegations that they're bringing against us. And I understand why they're going on the basis of diplomacy. But I also second those questions because allegations as serious as genocide should be submitted to the ICJ the way that South Africa submitted allegations of genocide against Israel to the ICJ. And I think it's even more frustrating because South Africa is faced with femicide on the rise, with children being violated in schools, with unemployment on the rise, and we've heard little to no word from our president or the GNU for that matter concerning those issues. And yet, at a drop of a hat, they're so quick to try to answer and clear up all of their baseless allegations. Because even white South Africans have come out to say that there is no white genocide happening in South Africa. Thank you.
Good morning, Cathy. About these mass killings, at the moment they are happening in KZN and Eastern Cape. Please, the police, they must do the stop and search, because these things, people, obviously, they carry these guns in the cars and ever. But stop and search is very, very important. Even if the guy is walking down the road with a big backpack or whatever, stop and search and see what is inside it. Because otherwise they're gonna spread like wildfire. And once they spread like wildfire from Eastern Cape and KZN and go to other provinces, and that's going to be a disaster. Nobody will know how to stop it. They must nip it in the bud now before it's too late.
Good morning, Kathy and SFM listeners. Kathy, it's high time now. The very people who call themselves the community leaders must be charged when such incidents happen. Now, look now. They mobilize people to leave their houses early in the morning to go and cause havoc at the freeway. Now, 2 people are dead. Who is going to be responsible? It's high time. These very so community leaders must be charged, because most of these community leaders, they are not doing it for the community, but they are only doing it for the sake of building their own name, to say, hey, it's me who was leading this protest. Thanks, James Johannesburg.
Cathy Mohlahlana on SAFM.
Do you want
Stay.
All right, 10 after 11 o'clock. Welcome to the third and final hour of The Talking Point. Coming up in this hour, we're going to be unpacking the cost of living. In particular, our guests have joined forces and are behind the research that looks into the trends in the cost of living. The aim of this research is to eliminate poverty and inequality, and really to try to understand the interplay between services, wage growth, and household well-being, and how those affect the cost of living, particularly for poor and working households. Let me invite onto the show Julian May, who is a commissioner at the National Planning Commission. Julian, good morning to you. Thanks for your time this morning. Good morning, Julian. All right, not sure what's happening with Julian's line there. Let me go to Russell Wilderman, who is Social Policy Manager at UNICEF South Africa. Russell, good morning to you. Hello, Russell.
Hi, good morning, Cathy.
There we go. Good morning. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. You can hear me loud and clear, hey?
Yes, I can. Thank you.
Fantastic. Let me try Julian again. All right,
okay.
we're trying to get him on the line. So I'll let you know once he's on. We can continue then with the conversation in the meantime. This is really important work that has been done amongst the different partners, really, Russell, to try and understand and unpack how we can reduce the cost of living. And the impact that will have on poverty and on inequality. At a superficial level, these seem like obvious things. We know the relationship, between poverty and inequality, and we know that if you're from a poor or low-income household, the impact of the cost of living that you experience is perhaps heightened by that economic position. But what in particular about this research was important in identifying these specific markers to the extent that it then should be informing how we develop policy?
Yeah. Thank you so much, Cathy, for having me this morning. I think maybe it's best to think of this particular study in 3 components. The one is a public service component. In other words, having access to quality basic services, and then there's a question about, first of all, access, secondly, quality, and then thirdly, the utility or the usefulness of the service. And the report says quite a lot about these things, whether it's access to basic education, senior secondary, whether it's about access to the school nutrition program, all of these different public services that government is obligated to deliver. The second component was the more kind of broader macroeconomic component. In other words, to what extent does inflation or unemployment affect the life chances, affect the cost of living pressures for different families who find themselves in different points of the income distribution. And the third one is looking at the actual choices that households may make in terms of what are the goods and services that they value. So to give you a classic example, if I find myself in a community where we're not happy with the quality of education, we're going to move to another school, but that exposes that family to cost of living pressures, for example, transport cost, increase in fuel cost, etc., and therefore the exposure of that family to the cost of living pressures would be significantly more than, let's say, somebody who's decided to actually leave the child in this particular school, etc., etc. So we try to sort of look at the interface of these three different factors: the broader economy, the choices that households make, and of course, access to public services. Cathy, back to you.
Thanks for that, Russell. Let me see if Julian May, Commissioner at the National Planning Commission, is back on the line.
Yeah.
Good morning, Julian.
Good morning, and thank you for inviting me.
Sure, apologies for that difficulty there with the connection. So Russell says we should look at this research through the prism of really a public service mandate, right? And trying to identify where systemically things could be improved that have a direct impact on the cost of living. There were some findings, of course, coming out of this research that I think should really make all of us as South Africans stand up and pay attention. This idea that poverty rates in the country in 2023 are still largely the way they were about 10 years ago, that is problematic, because it suggests that South Africans in the last decade of our lives, things have been static for the majority of South Africans.
In fact, it's possibly more concerning than that, because in some instances, I think for the lives of certain groups of South African, things have in fact gotten worse. I think the report is comforting in that we can see that there was some progress prior to 2019 in reducing the level of income poverty in South Africa. And I think the report is comforting in that if you look at other dimensions of poverty from a multidisciplinary, a multidimensional perspective, you can see that availability of services to households has increased. Now, that is the question there is it's whether or not the service was available. It says there isn't sufficient information about the quality or the reliability of that service. But I think we know what that story is as well from other experiences. The breaks in and being able to access electricity, even though you may have a meter board in your house. The quality of the water that comes through the taps, which we've seen even very recently, problems of water contamination. So the report is disturbing. I like to look at the fact that there were signs that we were making progress until some of the unexpected events in 2019 and 2020.
If we look at the role that unemployment plays, particularly when it comes to poverty, it's not surprising here that employment is identified as one of those measures that is crucial in escaping poverty. Do you get a sense that as a country, there is enough will, effort being put behind improving our employment levels? Julian?
I think there is a lot of discussion around that topic, and there's a lot of concern by different spheres of government to be able to do something about unemployment, but perhaps not enough awareness of what can be done. Quite some time ago, there was a campaign encouraging people to offer employment, to employ others. And that, to me, is where part of the solution lies. It's a willingness of not just government to employ people, but citizens, whether they are employed via domestic work, or businesses who are offering, who opt to go for more wage-intensive ways of producing the goods or services that they're involved in. So again, the will of the government isn't enough to be able to generate employment. We need a whole of society willingness to be able to tackle questions of unemployment. there we start needing to look at the structural causes of unemployment, why we have such high levels, and what are the reasons for the reluctance to employ people.
I would also say that, Russell, there seems to be this juxtaposition here, because on the one hand, there is the need to create employment, but on the other, when we look at just what is happening in different parts of the country, that you would still, in places like KwaZulu-Natal, have groups of people that are working but are considered the working poor. And those, of course, would not be in a different situation to those. They would be no better off, perhaps, than those that were completely unemployed, at least in as far as the markers around poverty are concerned.
An absolutely important point. Yes, indeed. Cathy, if you go back, for example, to COVID-19, what we have discovered was that even if the quality of the job that you have is not that great, the fact that you've got access to the labor market opens the possibility for other smaller jobs. So when the economy was closed down completely, it eliminated that possibility for somebody who didn't have a formal, a job opportunity, whatever we want to call it. So I would say that in spite of the pessimism around the working poor, because that must be a gut-wrenching situation, if you are working but still not in a position to lift yourself out of poverty, it can be self-defeating. But as long as the economy stays open, as long as people have access to multiple opportunities, and I think this is the important point, I think maybe that I want to make. What the study didn't cover is how households under the stress are actually responding to the cost of living crisis. A report of this nature cannot cover that, but clearly, Cathy, we need the evidence to understand what are the coping mechanisms, what are people doing to survive. So if I'm part of the working poor, how do I supplement my income? And do we know enough about how these things actually work empirically? Do families rely on contribution from other family members? Are religious institutions involved, et cetera, et cetera? Because there surely must be a way in which people are coping under extremely difficult circumstances. So we should not just identify the cost of living pressures. I think the next step for us as UNICEF, for example, would be to understand how people actually manage and cope through all of these difficult circumstances. But it is, as you rightfully said, it is an issue that if you're working, you're still considered to be poor. Cathy?
Julian, one thing's about, again, when we look at the impact of the cost of living, because South Africans in their day-to-day lives will talk about how things are getting harder. It just feels that much tougher. It just feels like, it's more and more of a struggle to make ends meet. To what extent does this research show that if the services that people were receiving, and these are services that are run and administered by the state, that if those services improved, it would have a direct impact on the cost of living?
Most certainly, if the services would improve, it would have an impact. Again, going back to my earlier comments about you may have a service available, but if it's not reliable or if it's not of good quality, then that's going to have a negative impact. So say in the case of water, there's obviously a direct impact on people's health. If you drink contaminated water, that has a whole range of negative outcomes, and some of those will be borne differently by different household members. But then someone has to deal with the fact that water, it has to be obtained in some way. And that inevitably involves queuing for water if water is going to be provided and brought into an area. It probably involves boiling the water if you've been advised that the water is not safe to drink. So who does that work is of importance. And one of the things I think we need to be careful with reports like these is the language is often it's the household that is doing this, or it's South Africans. But the situation will vary according to who you are in the household. In particular, often women are bearing the heaviest costs in terms of time that they have to put in terms of additional work, in terms of the kind of work that they do, to be able to make up for the shortcomings of service provision. Equally, children are often those that bear the brunt of the negative outcomes. One of the things that the report doesn't touch on, but other studies have shown, is the persistent level of stunting in South Africa, of under 5 stunting. And that can often be linked to bouts of diarrhea, which are a result of poor service provision. So again, just to emphasize the need to think not only about the general population, but specifically who is it that's going to be most affected by the kinds of trends that the report describes.
And even in doing that, because we have municipalities that will run your indigent registers, where if you qualify to be on that list, you'll be exempt from having to pay for certain services. But part of what this report has found is that in sort of the period under review, the decades that we're talking about here, there's in fact been a rolling back of some of those provisions, that we don't have more people being added to those lists. The provisions are actually less than what they were. And yet, people's real income hasn't changed. And I guess that's why you're saying that in some instances, some people are worse off today than they were 10 years ago.
That is correct. And unfortunately, the indigent system is one of the ones which is not working particularly well in many municipalities. And that is a system that was designed to be a poverty-reducing strategy. To the extent that it's failing to reach all that are eligible for the no-fee benefits or for the free services that are offered, then that becomes quite a serious problem. And it would be linked to the capacity then of municipalities to be able to collect and process that information. And the municipalities themselves need to be able to afford to be able to provide those services. I think one of the concerns that we have as a country, and again, it's not reflected in this particular report, but we know that from other studies, are the extent to which municipalities are often unable to pay for the services that they themselves are supposed to provide. Russell,
do you think that this research is helpful then in helping South Africans understand and I suppose also give some form of reference point for why it is that they feel their lives are not getting better?
I think, Cathy, before I sort of try and address your question a bit more directly, what we have to give credit for is government is really trying to unlock, some of these puzzles. So, for example, Operation Vulindlela has resulted in the situation where we still have load shedding, but significantly less load shedding. That's a direct intervention, and we know how important power is to individuals, to different households. And going back to your question to Julian about free basic services, what's the point of having free basic services if they're not even available? So in that regard, Operation Vulindlela is beginning to make a difference. You can also think, for example, about many municipalities and cities going back to the blue drop situation, where the quality of water becomes an issue. It's been terminated from a lot of the policy agendas in the last couple of years, but it's now back, etc. Or you can think of, for example, the ports and making the ports more effective, therefore directly affecting employment in South Africa. So clearly from the government's perspective, there are specific efforts which are being done. I'm also thinking about work which is presently being done in the presidency, where there's some talk of an accelerated plan to put children at the center of policy making in South Africa. So amidst all the pessimism and negativity, I think there's also recognition that government is trying. Maybe the reforms will have to take some time to bed in properly. And we also need to better understand what provisions within the social wage allow people to graduate into more productive economic activity, whether it's further schooling, whether it's further university, whether it's employment, etc., etc. But I think the ordinary South African is in a far better position than this research report to tell us exactly how they are feeling every day. And as I said to you earlier, we really need to begin to invest in research to understand how people and families under different pressures are able to cope. What are the coping mechanisms, and how can policy actually be recalibrated to support people coping a bit better, to support people managing a bit better? And I think that's the one area that is not yet well covered in the research. And it's something that UNICEF will definitely look forward to investigating. Cathy?
All right, we're going to continue this conversation shortly. For now, it's 11:30. Time for your latest news headlines.
Thank you, Cathy. On the news headlines, President Cyril Ramaphosa says Finance Minister Enoch Godongwana is finalizing the third edition of the 2025 budget. Parliament will host the third tabling of the budget on Wednesday. Police have confirmed that 2 people have died and 1 has been seriously injured during a violent protest in Diepkloof, Soweto. And EFF members and supporters have started to march from the union buildings to the offices of National Treasury in Pretoria. A full update follows at the top of the hour.
Do you want an experience of a lifetime? Where every day is filled with challenges of providing Lisa Vanderpump curated experiences while dealing with rivalries, romances, and misadventures. It's drama at Vanderpump's French Estate. Chatel Rosabelle and the staff can't wait to give you a front row seat to all the drama. Catch Vanderpump Villa, Saturdays on S3 at 8:30 p.m. S3 open up. S3.
This May, SAFM celebrates Africa Month with you. As we honor the legacy of the Organization of African Unity, we bring you rich conversations and stories that shape the continent. Join us as we celebrate African pride, unity, and progress. SAFM, leading the conversations that move us.
The Talking Point with Cathy Mohlahlana. Weekdays, 9 a.m. till midday.
You're listening to The Talking Point. Joining us on the show this morning, Julian May is a commissioner at the National Planning Commission, and Russell Wilderman is a social policy manager at UNICEF South Africa. And we're looking into the trends in the cost of living research that has been an undertaking, as you've heard, together with several partners, really trying to unpack, the cost of living and what are some of the markers that actually have an impact, right, on the cost of living, particularly when we're looking at poverty, inequality, and what do we need to be improving systemically if we're going to make an impact, or if we're going to improve the cost of living. The last thing that I specifically wanted to highlight as one of the findings coming out of this report is the role of education. Now, education has been one of the big tenets of our democracy and our democratic dispensation. This is why we even have no-fee schools in this country, so that everybody can have access to education. But it's concerning, at least as detailed in this report, that we are not only seeing what is a diminishing value of secondary education in the country, but of course problems as well when it comes to accessing education. Julian, speak to me about this issue, because it seems to me that this is now going to be one of the future drivers of inequality and poverty, because if people are unable to send their children to schools or what they believe are good schools where they can get a good education, it has an impact on their ability to access the job market. And the cycle, as one can imagine then, almost self-replicates from there.
Yes, Cathy, I think that is a very concerning finding from the report, is the fact that the attainment of secondary school education is no longer sufficient to be able to ensure employment and to be able to ensure you can improve your earning power. We've, right from the beginning of South Africa's democracy, education and ensuring equality in education has been a consistent theme of our policies, recognizing that people need to be skilled in order to be able to get jobs. Plus, education offers more than just simply an instrumental value in allowing you to get employed. It is also something which allows you to improve your functioning as a member of society. And yet we are seeing this trend that education is not resulting in jobs at all, let alone better jobs. It's of concern because, as you say, the report also highlights the difficulties and the expense of attaining of getting education. While our no-fee school system goes some way towards reducing one aspect of the cost of attending school, there are many other things that parents have to find money for in order for a child to attend school, and that includes transport costs as well as other costs associated with education. So we've seen a decline in the value of education, at least in economic terms, and an increase in the difficulty, both financially and otherwise, of getting that education. A thing which I think we also maybe don't stress enough, and again the report can't comment on this, but again we know that from other research, is that children have agency in their own right. Children are also making decisions about whether they believe it is worth attending school or not. And I think, certainly since COVID, one of the things that I suspect is happening is that children are either not attending school or not attending school regularly, and without the social workers and other systems in place to be able to address that, it means that there may well be children that are not receiving education at all, and we can expect to see declines in other important indicators of well-being, such as literacy, becoming an issue. What to do about it is difficult. It is about making sure that firstly that the education is offering something. It's offering a value in terms of your ability to work, but also value in terms of life skills. And I think one area that we do need to be thinking about is how to ensure that our education system is keeping up with the challenges that children now face in South Africa.
Yes, so much that I think needs to be reflected on there, Julian, as you've rightfully highlighted, because that if we're unable to solve that, it means that this poverty, this inequality, we are then creating it perpetually into the future, with the generations that are now at ECD centers, or that are supposed to be, getting access to ECD centers and other forms of early childhood development. Nhlanhla, you're calling us from KZN. Good morning to you. You want to weigh in here? Hello, Nhlanhla. Nhlanhla, are you on the line?
Yes, my sister, how are you? Good morning, my sister. Thanks for bringing your guest, and I heard one of your guests speaking about inequalities of within labor markets. Inequalities can be seen in two terms. Firstly, it is the one that is within labor market, income segregation, lack of training and recruitment and all. Outside of labor market, lack of education and training, that's government responsibility. Distribution of assets, land, housing, infrastructure, and all, that's government responsibility. And when you speak of inequalities, I think we must also come up with the ideas of how are we going to tackle the inequalities. Since it comes from different sectors, from the government and the private sectors, and how are we going to enforce the private sector and the government to ensure that they address the issue of inequalities from those specters, in fact.
Yeah, and Nkandla, the question that you're raising is an important one, and I'm going to ask Russell perhaps to be the one to try and answer there. To say, Russell, now that all of this work has been done, it can become yet another report that has very important, insightful information, but nothing more than that.
Cathy, I think, this question goes to the heart of what we're trying to do. The main point is to try and disrupt the transmission mechanism that goes from one family to the other, one generation after another, and where the cycle of poverty is actually repeated. The point is we have the solutions on hand in South Africa. The South African government is quite aware, for example, that we have to invest heavily in ECD. The problem is we haven't yet massified ECD. We haven't yet got to the point where every single child that should be in an ECD center is in an ECD center. And we've got to ask ourselves, why is that the question? And I think it's partly related to what I was trying to say earlier. South Africa as a country, we need to have that national conversation, that national dialogue. What are the things that we want to prioritize in the next 5 to 10, 15, 20 years? And can we then begin to shift resources to these things? Because we know that ECD, if done properly, if done organically, if done in the right way, will prepare children much better. We also know that children should be in a position that even prior to going to school, they should be well fed. Their brain should be fully developed. Because if you don't do those things, then you're just going to repeat the cycle. So from the government point of view, and I think the whole of society point of view, we just need to focus on those transmission mechanisms. Whether it is ECD, whether it is when the baby is in the womb, when what kind of care to give to the pregnant a woman, all of those foundational things just need to be pepped up kind of significantly, because in the absence of doing anything about it, we're going to continue with the stunting problems. We're going to continue with learning difficulties. And once a child is not in a position to take advantage of the opportunities bequeathed to him or her by the state, we are just repeating the cycle. So Cathy, I would contend, and I would say this to Nkandla, we have the solutions. Those solutions must be effectively implemented. They must be massified. We as a country must make decisions about where the resources go. We cannot plug every hole in society. South Africa's economy is not large enough. We don't have all of the resources necessary to do all the things at the same time. Prioritization. And as I said, keep children at the center of that policy-making process. Cathy, back to you.
All right. Let me bring in more views from our listeners on this topic.
Cathy, when you refer to services and cost of living, you are so accurate. You're so correct. If you look at the amount that you pay for medical aid, school, hospitals, everything must pay private to get something right. To get a proper service, you have to pay for it. Now, imagine if the governments, municipalities was run as they should, optimally for the people. How much expendable income people should have had. People that can use that money to live and contribute to the economy. But now for everything you must pay because the ANC failed every department in this country. Thank you.
Hey Cathy, this research is actually talking to what I'm going through right now. I recently moved a child from the rural areas as a relative's child to Johannesburg, and this child cannot read. In grade 3, cannot read, does not understand English. And I've informed the teachers, but it's now towards end of May and no one has paid attention to this. I'm now left with spending money taking this child to a private school because I've had a school where they say they're going to sit with him and give him extra classes and teach him how to read. Where he's coming from, he was not taught how to read. So there's such an impact on poor service delivery to what we are then do as parents to short circuit what government is doing, because government gives us such poor services. Thanks, it's Bongi here.
Yeah, and sure, it's so true. It's almost like a double cost if you look at it, because on the one hand, you are taxed, and that should be funding some of those services that should be facilitating and making our lives easier. But when the quality of those services is not at the standard that they need to be, which is part of what this report finds, is that, yes, there's been an improvement in access, but there's been a deterioration in the quality. It leaves you in exactly the same position as you would have been if you didn't have access to that service at all, that you have to try and procure it privately. And so you're effectively being charged twice. You know, it's a double bill, but you replicate it across all of these different sectors of our lives, and it has that compounding effect. Julian, for you, as the National Planning Commission, I know what you would want to have happen with this research, alongside all of the other work that you do. But of course, there's what you wish for in reality.
Well, in reality, we are coming very close to the end of the National Development Plan, the goals that we set to have achieved in 2030. Key of those goals was the elimination of poverty and the reduction of inequality. We're a long way from achieving the goals, and as the report has suggested, despite some earlier progress, it was even then too slow, and now possibly is reversing. So at least one of the things, and it's a poor answer for given the seriousness of the problem, but it's something that is important. It's for us to start reflecting now. What would we expect from a plan that for South Africa that will work, that we can implement? My own view is that we will need to start thinking rather differently about South Africa than when the National Development Plan was first written, and start to recognize that there are aspects of South African society that rather than attempt to change, we need to work with. So one example that I am particularly interested in is what we refer to it as the informal economy, but it's a whole range of those coping strategies that Russell has referred to, which enable people to live, and how we've been treating those, and whether we've been actually undermining those by policies which might be inappropriate to what South Africa really looks like. Let me give you an example. One area where we know many people are through which people are able to cope is through street trade, buying goods and then selling them on street corners, whether it's beverages or whether it's fresh fruit and vegetables or processed food. That's a really important way in which people are being able to cope. And yet, in many parts of South Africa, some of those activities have been deemed as unlawful by local authorities, and people are chased away from doing that very activity that enables them to be able to get by.
All right. Julian, we're going to have to leave it there for this morning, but let me thank you and Russell for your insights. That brings us to the end of the talking point for this Monday morning. The show back with you again tomorrow between 9 o'clock and midday. Have yourselves a lovely afternoon.
We all have dreams. Some people dream to be astronauts, while others want to yell, Vimba, as they chase that elusive shoplifter sprinting out and into Diamond Walk. Others might look at a broomstick and think to themselves that witchcraft might be the way to go. The possibilities are endless. But for Hollywood stars Ryan Reynolds and Rob McElhenney, their dreams is to make it big in the English football leagues. Tune into Welcome to Wrexham as the duo aim to turn Wrexham AFC into an underdog story that the world can root for, bringing hope and change to the community. Welcome to Wrexham, Saturdays at 3 p.m. only on S3. Open up.
are on a humongous mission to play their hearts out. But Masandawana ladies believe they are unstoppable. This is the Hollywood Bet Super League. Do not miss out on the glittering action of Mzansi's women's football. TUT Ladies FC versus Mamelodi Sundowns Ladies FC on Sunday 25 May at 2:30 p.m. Streaming live on SABC Plus, SABC One and SABC Sport on DTT Channel 4. Proudly brought to you by SABC Sport. For the love of the game.
The book reading. Please note that the views expressed in this book are not that of the station. Listeners' discretion is advised. SAFM presents another episode of the book Winning the Money Game, a guide to financial well-being by Mlamuli Mbambo, read by Samson Kumalo.
Sounds amazing. So you're only paying a deposit for 2 taxis and he has space for 3. I wish I had 500 rand now so I could be paying the deposit for the 3rd taxi that is available. You already have 300 rand. If you're willing to put it all in this opportunity, although I do not suggest putting all your eggs in one basket, then you need to figure out what you could offer the taxi owner that would be worth the value of 200 rand to him. I knew nothing about the taxi industry and owned nothing, so there was nothing I could give that was worth 200 rand. Are you sure? Probed Dlamini. I thought hard and said, yes, I'm sure. I guess I will have to miss this opportunity. You do not have to miss it, responded Dlamini. You can offer a few things for this opportunity. I remember the taxi owner complaining that new guys usually fail their learner's tests, and this costs him a lot of money and time because they can only start driving when they pass their learner's tests. He also has to pay for the rewriting of these tests. Since he has 5 new taxis, he will need 5 new guys to pass their learner's test and become drivers. I would think that with your skills as a teacher, you could have the new guys pass their learner's test the first time. His guys are available after working hours. So this will not conflict with your day job as a teacher. I can definitely do that. Great. For each driver you teach to pass the learner's test the first time, you can charge 20 rand. That is how you will negotiate the 100 rand. 20 rand times 5 drivers. Secondly, because you have been trustworthy in paying yourself first, I'm comfortable to lend you the remaining 100 rand, as I know you'll be able to pay this amount back to me in 2 months using the 10% you save from your salary. I will add a 10% interest fee for me lending you the money. Nothing is for mahala, my friend. You will owe me 110 rand. Your repayment terms will be 50 rand at the end of this month and the next, and then settle the remaining 10 rand on the 3rd month. Are you comfortable with that? Dlamini offered with a kind expression on his face. I had never thought there were so many options when buying something. I'd always thought paying cash was the only way, I replied. Most people think the same way. Money is a just medium of exchange. Always think about what you can exchange as an alternative. In this deal, you'd be exchanging your skills as a teacher and your trustworthiness. This is how I bought my first chicken assets. Kulu paused his story about Dlamini and reached for his juice. Mkulu, that is an amazing story. Mr. Dlamini is very smart. He found a way for you to take part and also trusted you. What skills or talents do you have that could be exchanged in place of money? Asked Mkulu. During my studies, I participated in Toastmasters and 2 non-profit organizations. Through these experiences, I learned to be a very good public speaker. I could use this skill as a medium of exchange because sometimes young people are required to give talks to fellow young people. As I start my job, I will learn many new skills and would be vigilant as to how they can also be utilized in other scenarios and environments. Mkulu gave me a look of pride and continued his story with Mr. Dlamini. Taxi owner agreed to my terms, and I taught the new guys how to pass their learner's test the first time, which they did. The taxi owner was so impressed that he told other taxi owners, and soon I had classes every Tuesday evening. The money I made from that training business allowed me to buy another taxi. A few months past running the training business, Lamin and I were discussing our chickens. I told him that through my training business, I had met other taxi owners who needed people to buy additional taxis so they could also fill their licenses and collect management fees. Most routes made good money, but there were a few routes that we did not want to invest in. Lamini also asked me about the training business. I told him I had more students than I could teach, but I did not want to teach more than Tuesday evenings because it could start affecting my day job as a school teacher. Interestingly, at the time, my training and taxes were paying me close to my monthly salary, but I still loved my job and did not want to quit. Money is great, but there are things it cannot buy. For me, being a teacher provided an opportunity to see the light in a child's eye when they understand something new. As a teacher, I also got to influence and guide children on their life journey. Those are truly priceless experiences. Lamini said there was a way to expand my business without spending more time on it. I remarked that this sounded like it was wishful thinking. Lamini promised it was possible and asked if he could be my business partner in the training business if he provided a solution. Lamini had great business acumen, a very strategic mind, and we had become good friends. My business would become bigger with him on board, so I agreed. It is wise to work with someone who already has a good relationship and results with money, especially when you are starting out. Lamini asked how many times each student attended the classes. I told him that each student attended 4 times. He charged 20 rand per student, and each student paid 5 rand per class. He asked if I would be willing to pay another teacher 2 rand per class to teach the students on Thursday evenings. You'd now make 3 rand extra from the Thursday classes without having to teach them personally, giving you an extra profit of 12 rand per student. I found the proposal quite interesting. A service business that does not need me to be there physically for it to deliver the service. If we do it the way you suggest, we can also provide the service to other taxi associations in other ranks. I like your enthusiasm, but let us first perfect